The main thing about the elements, what we want to look at is essentially their electromagnetic energy. And we refer this to as a quadrupolar magnet, four-pole magnet. That's all it means, right? And we categorize it into air, fire, water, and earth, right? But you want to look at these as four magnets. You need to create a balance of all these elements. When you do that, in the center, you create a null point where it starts to form a stillness, which allows you to pay attention to vacuity. Now we can get into Akasha. When we talk about Akasha, there's an infinity quality, right? So you feel like you're in an infinite space of vacuum, but it's not empty per se. It is described as emptiness, but it's not empty. You want to limit how much you define it, because every definition you give of something that you haven't experienced, that definition is an expectation for that experience.
Do you recall, Dinesh, for yourself, like first time you went to the Akashic space, how did you feel afterwards?
I fell asleep for 4 hours.
Hello, curious souls and beautiful minds. Welcome back to another Awaken Aware podcast session. We're going to do the part 2 with Dinesh because, as I mentioned before, we went a little bit over on the original recording. So in this episode, we will go into the elements. We'll talk about the Akashic space, or also referred to as the quantum field or void or infinity or consciousness. And we'll touch on what is non-dual light. And we're going to explore how being in this Akashic space is going to be helpful in your everyday life as well. So let's jump right in.
I was always curious around the elements, kind of like how the elements influence our lives. And I've heard obviously before only about, from the Chinese perspective, the elements. There was fire, the water, the earth, and then the wood and metal. And those 5 elements didn't quite make sense to me, like why wood and why metal? While I understand that yes, trees are part of our ecosystem, but to me that didn't quite make sense. And so then learning that the Eastern philosophy has the air and then also a space as an element, that made a lot more sense to me. And so if we're looking at the Hermetic system and or we're looking at the ancient Indian system, then we're looking at the elements of fire, water, earth, air, and space, or ether, right? Which we also then refer to as Akasha in Indian system, right? The ether is, yeah. So sometimes I feel like people refer to the space as a quantum field, or the potentiality, or the void, or the infinity, or Akashic space, right? They're all the same, yeah?
Yep.
So one of the things before we jump right into the Akashic space, could you just point a little bit about like what each element carries? What kind of like personalities, and how do these elements correlate with human personality, for instance? Because I remember I walked into class with the Mark Rasmus and it says, oh yeah, air and the fire. Like, huh? I was like, okay, what does that mean exactly? Right. So we define the personalities a little bit, kind of like it's an Indian system that has the Pitta, Kapha, and Vata. And I think this is kind of similar thing as well. So if you can speak maybe a little bit to the elements and kind of like how they carry, how they affect us, and personality wise as well.
Yeah. So when we look at elements and these whole concepts, different systems have different approaches to them, right? So you've got the Hermetic system, you got the Vedic systems, you got the Taoist systems, and probably other systems out there as well. And remember, a system is just a framework for you to go through to get to a certain understanding. Then you let the system go, right? So that's what systems are. So, but when we look at the elements, let's look at metaphysically what they are, because there's a lot of mystery around, oh, the elements of fire and blah, blah, blah. No, it's just basically electromagnetic energy, right? So when you have the electric and magnetic energy, it's just only 2 elements. And then from there, the movement between the 2 creates the air element, right? And then when they have a center of gravity, it creates the earth element. So when it's created a field, there's a center of gravity to it, which is the earth element. But this is a quantitative aspect of way of looking at it, right? When you look at the qualitative aspect, now you're starting to add characteristics to it. So now there's different information to that. So what information is contained in the air element, what information is contained in the earth element, now it's different. It changes, right? The energy changes. But essentially, when you look at it from just a metaphysical perspective, it's the movement between the electric and magnetic energy, and the condensation of all three creates a center of gravity, which is the earth element, right? So that's if you want to look at it from a scientific lens. But if you want to look at it more from a metaphoric lens, there's the characteristics of fire. What does fire want to do? It wants to expand and it wants to radiate, right? It's basically light. And then what does magnetism want to do, or the water element? It wants to, it has a cohesiveness to it. It wants to attach to things, and it's got a nurturing quality to it as well as a violent quality, but that's how we normally look at it. And then the earth quality is a groundingness. There's like a density to it. The air qualities, there's an expansion and freedom and lightness to it. These are just different qualities and labels that we're putting onto it, so have information and energy to behave in a certain way, right? So for example, the way we use the elements in a practical level is, say, if you want better intellectual capabilities or understanding the insight mind to activate, what do we require for that? What sort of characteristics what we require? An open-mindedness, right? So where you're open-minded meaning you're receptive to new information. So there's that. There's a lightness aspect. If you're heavy, like even physically or astrally, there's a closeness to it, right? So you want to be light and expansive and open and very. This is an optimal state to be in to increase your intellect, increase your intuition and insight, right? So this is one aspect of air element which makes it very easy to work with in when you say reading a book or want to understand a piece of information. And then you bring it to the physical body. You want to make your body light. So this is where when you make your body light, your mass moves from down there and more towards your chest, right? Now running becomes easier, right? You become light on your feet. So that's a practical application on adding that information of air element to your body, right? But if you want power, if you want to radiate, you use fire element. Now there's a presence that you create in your field from a physical, astral, mental level of, oh, this person's very willful, blah, blah, blah. All these sort of things, there's energetic information, and we categorize it into elements. But the main thing about the elements, what we want to look at is essentially their electromagnetic energy. And we refer this to as a quadrupolar magnet. So a quadrupolar magnet
It's a big word.
it's basically four magnets, four pole magnet. That's all it means, right? So if you have, and we have this in our astral body with the different personalities, and we categorize it into air, fire, water, and earth, right? And but you want to look at these as four magnets, right? And depending on the information collected over the period of time that you've been here, the choices that you made, you lean to one or two of those magnets, meaning you might be an air person or a fire person, these sort of things. That's how they categorize these things. What we want to do is we want to create an equilibrium or balance out these elements where the electromagnetic field around each of the magnets are equal. But if you're dominant, there's an interaction that's happening with all the other magnets, which creates a static in the field. There's disruption in the field. Now that when you have that, now you can't enter into stillness. You need to create a balance of all these elements. When you do that, in the center, you create a null point where it starts to form a stillness, which allows you to pay attention to vacuity. Now we can get into Akasha. Because to get into Akasha, you need stillness. So we have to look at the elements and bring them to a balance to be able to bring everything to a quietude and stillness. Now you can pay attention to Akasha, right? So that's the ultimate reason for working with the elements. But there are all these other practical aspects that you can work with it as well.
Yeah, I love that you spoke to that a little bit, because there was the bunch of exercises that we were doing with Sifu Mark Rasmussen, and I know you do that as well, is that what's the feeling of the air, for instance? Like, how do you feel when you're airy, kind of like light on your feet and rising? And what you do, and then also Sifu Mark Rasmussen has done, is that you make specific exercises for you to feel this feeling of being like air, being like water, being like fire, being like earth, grounded, etc. And that embodying, I feel like, allows the mind, or just being, to understand the state of being, which then can be released, like you said, finding that nullified space in between, which again is the gateway to what we talk to about as Akasha or Akashic space, or the
Mhm.
ether. So again, and why do we go to Akashic space? What's the reason? What's the point? And then also, so let's start talking about Akasha and definition around. Again, I don't necessarily want to say definition, because anything you define, you can mislabel, etc. But give us some sort of a boundary about what Akasha is. Why is it helpful to understand and be there? Obviously, we've already alluded to the idea that when we're outside of the body, when we're outside of the being, that we are generating more energy, actually, in sense, right? So
Um,
what are maybe some of the other reasons that we might want to obviously be in this space? And then
mhm,
also, if it leads to understanding of what's non-dual light,
mhm.
explaining that as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so working with Akasha, you want to limit, especially this aspect, you want to limit how much you define it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because every definition you give of something that you haven't experienced, that definition is an expectation for that experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
Oh,
I don't know if that made sense, but like,
yes,
Yes.
yes. I'm just
Yeah.
like, whoop, stopped. Oh, okay.
so
Yeah.
when we talk about Akasha, there's an infinity quality, right? So you feel like you're in an infinite space of vacuum, but it's not empty per se.
Mm-hmm.
It is described as emptiness, but it's not empty. There's still a reaction that you have from a physical, astral, mental level to pay attention to formlessness, and you're working towards more and more of that emptiness. Why do we work with this etheric space? Because this is the portal which allows you to understand what consciousness really is, and it allows you to come into resonance with the universal consciousness, right? So we have an individual consciousness, and then from there, we want to be able to pay attention to the universal consciousness and start to create resonance and a unification to that. And this is where more spiritual and more, it's called magical abilities happen. So, but working with Akasha and light, that requires a certain level of commitment and dedication, um, because working with Akasha, it basically reflects. It's a karmic substance. It reflects whatever you're paying attention to,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what I mean by that is, say for example, you have a certain doctrine that you believe in. Let's say whether it's a Hindu doctrine or whatever religious doctrine, and then you pay attention to Akasha, it will give you that experience to validate your belief system,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's whatever the consciousness is attached to, it will reflect that. It's like a mirror. So
Right.
what we want to do is to work through Akasha safely, you want to cultivate equanimity and stillness. It's basically it's a substance which functions like a portal, where you bring a new energy and information, and then allows you to touch the universal mind, God, whatever you want to label it as. And uh, you don't want to talk about it too much. It's something that you should experience and be able to navigate through. And when I say navigate, it's an intuitive process, because remember, all of this stuff is not happening in the physical. In the physical, infinity doesn't make sense.
Right.
The brain can't comprehend what is infinity, only as a concept. Do you know what I mean? So the more you intellectualize this, the more difficult you're making it for yourself when you do go through that space. All we need to know is how to do the three transformations, how to release time, a perception of time, release space, and then be able to go into this timeless, spaceless quality. And
Mm-hmm.
from there, maintain equanimity when you're paying attention to this. And from there, you can start to access the non-dual light space, the universal consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, you accumulate a certain level of critical mass working with Akasha, then you can start discussing it with more practice methods rather than what it is. As a society, we're really contracted to the idea of wanting to know what it is. What it
Mm-hmm.
is not important. It's
Yeah.
why and how is important.
Mm.
Once you understand the why and how, then you're able to function with it. What it is doesn't matter. You'll figure that out when you figure it out. And even when you do figure it out, it doesn't really matter,
Yeah.
right? We want to know why and how things work so we can make our lives better, we can make the people around us better, and as a collective consciousness, we're able to evolve and raise. That's what's important. And for that,
Mhm.
what I emphasize on is the process and principles,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we can discuss all day long. And I see these podcasts with the scientists and with spiritual people. They're constantly debating or discussing about what it is. What is the nature of reality? Who cares? Like we'll figure that out. It's not important. But what we want to know is the how and why we can evolve to raise the group
Yeah.
consciousness. And this is where there's an
Mhm.
emphasis on the process and emphasis on understanding the principles so we can easily do that efficiently.
Beautiful. Awesome. Tammy, does something come to you? Are you curious about something here?
Yeah, when I really sort of everything started to click, I began to say much less, like talk less.
Mm,
Before that, before I had more of an understanding, I wanted to talk and figure out and the
Yeah,
doing,
mhm.
yeah,
right? And so as I began to do less, say less, and experience more, and then for me, I termed it like be an example of that which you desire to be, see, have more of. Like be an example of this feeling that you try to talk about it, but you can't because it's like you're saying you're just attaching different agreements
yeah,
and experiences and definitions.
yeah,
So it just makes a lot of sense, everything that you're saying.
yeah.
It's I feel like you're sort of putting into words, and I'm a writer too, and I'm in the process of writing my second book, and I'm using my experience to write about. And
Hmm.
very often it's like the words to put on the page for people to read as I'm trying to describe it. So I'm coming into a space of, for that purpose, wanting to be able to describe it. But just yeah, it's very comforting to me as you're saying this, because I'm like,
Mm.
yeah,
Mm,
that's sort of my, like, oh, somebody understands it. It sort of feels real to me because somebody in
Yeah.
front of me is speaking of it. And so
Hmm.
now it's feel, oh yeah, okay, so it was real. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
That's good.
beautiful.
yeah.
One of the things that I try to do as a teacher is speak to people's intuition rather than their intellect,
Hmm.
because the
Yeah,
intuition already
yeah.
knows. So there's this feeling like, oh yeah, yeah, I got it. Yeah, it's I already knew this,
Mhm.
because they already do know it.
Yep.
But when you speak to someone's intellect, you're just adding more baggage, more and more baggage
Yeah. Yeah.
into, yes, all these sort of things.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah,
so that's why I emphasize on the process and the principles. And I
yeah.
don't talk about my own personal experience, because personal experience is subjective to me. And when I
Yeah.
talk
Yes.
about my personal experience, there's an expectation that you have to have the same experience.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
we're all unique individual beings, although we share the same consciousness in the field. We
Mhm.
we have our own evolutionary pathway on how we get to that. So this is
Mhm.
why we don't want to talk about experience.
Mhm.
We want to talk about how we got to that experience.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I
Exactly.
love that when we were at the training and Sifu Mark Rasmus was taking us to the Akashic space for the first time in Akashic meditation, and a few people have asked the questions like, okay, so is it like this or is it like that? And he would just say, just let yourself feel whatever you'll feel. He was
Mhm.
very adamant about that. You don't want to help me tell you my experience because then it will hinder yours, right?
Mm,
Or it will basically affect kind of like now you're going from your, like we're saying, like from your intellect rather than from
Mm.
curiosity of like where I am and trying to learn about this, right?
mm.
So
Mhm.
that was
Yeah.
amazing actually. The first time, and also, one of the things that do you recall, Dinesh, for yourself, like first time you went to the Akashic space, how did you feel afterwards?
I fell asleep for 4 hours. Yeah, I
Four
remember
hours.
first, and this is in the morning. Like we had practice at, I don't know, 10 o'clock or something, and he did an Akashic transmission, and I'm just falling asleep on my chair, trying to be concentrated and paying attention. And my room was literally next to his. So I walked over and just went bang on the bed, and I just knocked out like for 4 or 5 hours. So this is like the thing.
Yeah.
This is what I mean by Akashic will.
Yeah.
So we can be very willful. Say someone's very physically strong and they're able to push their body. They've got physical will, right? Someone who has emotional intelligence, they can regulate themselves in a large space. They have emotional intelligence, emotional will, right? Mental will, being able to focus. But this is a different type of thing. Essentially, what we're doing is being very hyper focused in a brainwave that's would reflect sleep. So you're in deep sleep, but you're hyper alert, right? It's a different, completely different type of will. It's what they refer to as samadhi,
Yeah.
all right? So this is something you have to practice. And one thing that can probably nullify this or get in the way is alcohol and drugs. Because as soon as you have alcohol and drugs, you've surrendered your will from the physical all the way, and there's no chance you can be able to stay focused in that sort of state of consciousness. So people who are wanting to develop them spiritually, that's a no-go. So ayahuasca, all these sort of things, they give you a trip, they open up the gateways, and you have an experience, but you can't control the experience, right?
Right.
So you basically become a puppet to it. And
Yes.
it's this is where, like, because I remember Sifu Mark was very, like, he's pretty lenient with a lot of things as a spiritual teacher, but that's something like for the 1 year training, he goes, no alcohol, no drugs. I was thinking, well, like he's not, but it didn't come from a judgmental space. I'm like, why is he saying that? I didn't quite understand it.
Yeah.
But now going through the process and understanding, like, oh, yeah, no way they can concentrate in that sort of state.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
even when you're like a normal person who can concentrate in that sort of state, to concentrate is quite challenging,
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Right.
when you dabble in those sort of things, forget about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I remember was also the requirement, not requirement, but was an advice I would say from Sifu Mark Rasmus, was that you practice this Akashic space, you go get 100 hours as quickly as you can in a one swoop kind of thing. So like an hour after hour, hour after hour, just so you become familiar in your being with this. And so obviously you've done 100 hours many times over, I believe, at this point. So how would you say that your ability to learn about how to get into this space fairly quickly by now, I suppose, has improved your life? Like what in a specifically that you notice, how did Akashic space meditation and or being able to be in that space have improved your life?
That's a good question. So, like, yeah, why would someone want to pay attention to nothing? Uh, so, uh, so when we talk about building critical mass, we're like, oh, well, why would I want to meditate for 100 hours straight? Like 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day. Essentially, you're building a relationship, right? Everything is based on relationship. Your conscious relationship to something. And this could be a person, this could be energy, this could be emptiness. So because emptiness is so elusive, you need a bit more focus and a bit more commitment to be able to build that relationship. Why would you do this? Because it's through this vacuum that all information and energy is contained in. Everything exists because of this vacuum. So you would talk about the quantum field, say everything is inherently empty. This emptiness is this Akashic etheric space, right? So when you have a conscious relationship to that space, now you got a huge advantage in terms of the reality that you want to create. Essentially, you're able to pull things into this vacuum, this etheric space that you don't want, bring things from that vacuum. It works like a portal, right? So, but how has it helped me in my life? So many different ways. There's too many different ways. But it's synchronicity. It's an alignment to my higher mind, which creates an alignment to the lower mind, which makes things happen. Because I was always a personality where I had a belief system, you have to work hard to get something, right? You have to work extremely hard to get something because that's what I was exposed to as a child because my parents moved to Australia as immigrants. They worked extremely hard to pay the mortgage, all that sort of stuff. That's what I witnessed, and so that became a belief system for me. This is what life is, right? So even in the spiritual process, I had this unconscious thing of needing to struggle and work hard to get something, and which is a resistance in many ways. But now life is like, I'm not doing anything and things are just happening. You know, like the opportunities are just presenting themselves. I'm not lifting a finger. I'm just practicing and keeping myself aligned as much as possible. And I see this as a reflection. Every time I'm misaligned, things start to go bad a little bit. I'm like, oh, okay, get realigned again. Things start to happen as a synchronicity. And you know, we've looked at this as, oh, this is magic, or no, it's basically the law of resonance. And like the science is starting to catch up now. They're saying, oh, entanglement, you know, all these sort of words that they are putting in, which is basically they've been
Yeah.
talking about for since ancient times. They just
Yeah.
use different labels, different names for it. But it's good. I'm really enjoying how the scientific community are slowly coming on board with this sort of stuff, because it
Yeah.
helps to evolve the group consciousness.
Yes.
Because
Mhm.
but what I would say to people is, you want to be your own scientist, you want to be your own priest, you want to be your own teacher, right? When you give your authority to someone else, right? Now they're the authority of truth. You've lost the game, regardless of who that may be.
Mhm.
You want to take that back, right? Because essentially we're all the same. We all share the same fabric of consciousness, right? You get access to that, you become your own teacher, you become your own scientist, and
Yes.
you navigate life the way you want to, based on your experience and your understanding, where you don't have to rely on different authorities to tell you what is reality, right? So this is super important for people to take ownership of their freedom. Because what we've done is we've handed over this power to authorities. And look, I'm not saying in a negative context at all. Like, I respect scientists, I respect spiritual teachers and all these sort of things, but we all have an accountability and a responsibility to take ownership of our own authority and our own experience of reality. And we have to look at, like, okay, how do I navigate all the different things? There's a big emphasis in the scientific community about with the scientific method of objective reality, right? And subjective doesn't matter. Where and that's an important principle, and the scientific method and being able to reproduce and so on, that's important. But you have to reflect that inward, right? There's an aspect where you're seeking truth. Are you able to reproduce a certain state of consciousness? Are you able to reproduce certain effects? Now you're using the scientific method for yourself. It doesn't really matter what you don't need to prove anything to the external world. It's more what's happening within your own state, right? And being truthful about it. That's super important. From there, you're able to, once you figure it out, I'm able to reproduce these things. Now you teach it to someone else, you've helped someone else. And you keep expanding that. Everyone has a method to navigate reality for themselves. They don't have to hand over power to different authorities.
Right. And then it amplifies basically. So
Exactly.
yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that also about the synchronicities that are happening as you have gone into this practice. That just reminds me of Tammy practices the Course in Miracles. I don't know if you've heard about that, but that also is like, there is the part where, like, what would you have me do? Who would you have me be? Where would you have me go? It's like there is that the question is just there, and you're like just going there because it allows the space to be open. Like, it's possible, anything is possible. So there is this openness, infinite, obviously, and since it's Akashic space, since it's ether, right? And so from that openness, from that infinity, anything is possible. And the synchronicities, again, back to the what you were saying about resonance, the law of resonance. It's like whatever you're vibrating, you're open to something. You may be excited, you may be inspired by something, then something comes your way. And then when you were speaking to, like, where you sometimes you feel stuck or something happens and change a course kind of thing, just going back to that space again and open up again, it allows the synchronicity as happen again because you're back in the flow kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, my words would be it's full, whole, complete self-responsibility. And I look at it as I am the space. The space is whatever I, create it to be, my will, and never a victim, because nothing's happening to us. And so to me, that's powerful. That's empowerment. That's living to me, is to live in that infinite knowing with full self-responsibility and the knowing of the energy and the source in which we are. Then yes, things are going to come and happen. Life is going to happen, and sometimes there's crisis and there's difficult things, but they become much smaller when you know of what you are and the space in which you're in. Yeah. It's
Cool.
beautiful. Yeah.
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 So
Dinesh.
when we talk about the Akashic space and the infinite possibilities, there's also probability, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we experience the same thing over and over again based on probability of a certain energetic pattern from the physical, astral, mental level. So certain thought patterns and emotional patterns, physical patterns, the
Mm-hmm.
Akashic substance underneath all of that has a blueprint which makes sure that pattern is that's a probability that keeps happening. So
Okay.
for us to be able to change that probability, we have to change states,
Yeah.
right?
Back to
And sometimes,
resonating, right?
yeah, this is the resonance thing.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've built a relationship with certain patterns, that's what keeps happening. So to be able to change that, this can be a slow, gradual process, or it can be an immediate process, depending on a few different things. On, say, if you're getting a transmission from someone else, or if you get help from different entities,
Mm-hmm.
all these sort of things, you can have a dramatic shift in those patterns. But essentially, it's probability. Most people are living the same lives over and over again because of probability. And that information is contained in that etheric space or that vacuum. So everything has an etheric substance underneath it, which makes sure that the probability is what's reflecting in form.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about infinite potentiality or possibilities, yes, but the probability of what's going to happen is based on the blueprint of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's
Mm-hmm.
within you, right? So yeah, how
Yeah.
you're vibrating, what you're resonating with, kind of thing. Like
Yeah,
where your
yeah.
beliefs are, whether they're limiting or just beliefs, whatever it is. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So this brings me to my I think final question for Akasha is around the. I know you often talk about the clarity of intent
Mhm.
and how your intentionality and being clear about what your objective is basically in your life at the moment is going to bring clearer results. Like if you don't have clarity of intent, the results that you generate will also possibly be vague.
Mhm.
And so I would imagine that with especially practicing or just like learning about this, being in this space, in this etheric body, the etheric space, and going into that without much of an intention, you probably don't get much of a result. However, if you have some sort of intention, let's say, pointing to me the next path I'm going to, I want to take, or my soul wants to take, just point me that direction, or something a little bit more specific, I suppose will get you a little bit more of a tangible result. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, yeah, that's an important question. So, clarity of intent, if we have to define it, clarity is basically having a clear idea of what you want. So,
Uh-huh.
how do we get this? It's based on our perceptions. So, we've got the five senses. With the five senses, we can navigate the physical world clearly, depending on how well you've trained it. So, for example, say someone is a gymnast, their proprioception is really developed. So they have clear clarity in terms of movement in space, right? An artist, they're able to discern color and pull all these things apart. They're able to paint a beautiful thing because they've trained a certain aspect of them, right? A musician with the ears, and so on and so forth. So we have to train our senses from not just the physical aspect, but from a metaphysical aspect. When you're able to do this, now
Mm-hmm.
you're able to get clarity of intent. Because when you increase your perception of something, it's clear. But if the perception is vague, then your intent will be vague, right? So to develop clarity of intent, it's not just, oh, I think about like, oh, I want this clear thing. No, it's not that. It's being able to clearly see where it is that you're going, clearly feel, hear, all these sort of things. And that's the metaphysical training of developing the sense gates, right? So that's how you produce clarity of intent. But when you're working with Akasha, intent is in form, right? Akasha is out of form. So you can't intend into non-form. So this is where the surrender quality comes in,
Okay.
right? So this is where, so when you're working with Akasha, it's infinite space, infinite potential, right? But if you, because it's infinite, you can be pulling good things in, bad things in, all sorts of different stuff. This is where prayer comes in, right? If we have a look at the science of prayer, it's the easiest way to get into a deep state of equanimity and stillness, because you're surrendering to something higher than yourself. It's essentially surrendering to a higher part of yourself that you haven't accessed yet. It's not something outside of you, it's happening all in your fabric of consciousness, and you're surrendering to a higher part of your consciousness. And from there, if you work through Akasha, it becomes easy, because surrender is a quality you require to pay attention to Akasha. You have to be outside of form. Your consciousness has to be outside of form. As soon as you intend, you're in form. So this is the anti-will that I was talking about, or anti-intent, if you want to call it that. So that's something you have to develop. And
Yeah.
like I can't really describe it more than that. It's a type of surrender quality. It's not submission. Submission is different. Surrender is a willful thing that you're giving up something. Submission is something that you're forced into. So once you get to that, now you're able to get into the non-dual light of the universal consciousness, which is the higher part of your consciousness. So, and once you've built that relationship with Akasha, it's not that you're intending from Akasha. You're like, you can't intend from Akasha. It's something that you're inviting. It's a different feeling quality. Yeah, because when we talk about Akashic will, it's not the same as what we normally have as intent or
I'm
will.
glad you pointed that out, because yes, I can have intention in my life. Let's say I want to affect many people, as many as I can. Let's say in your case, my case is in, clients as well, for Tammy as well. It's like I want to do my best in the way that I absolutely can. And then going with that kind of intent into that Akashic meditation. And this is the process of what you're referring to, I feel, as a surrender. So you're going into this meditation and you let that happen, right? So this is, I think, very consistent also with a Course in Miracles, I believe, for you, Tammy. Yeah. So you surrendering it to a higher power, to higher realms, because they already know, or it already knows, like what needs to be done. Like I don't know, really. Like you were saying, the synchronicities start happening, and so things just kind of align better than you could ever think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's beautiful. Thank you for making a distinction there.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, especially the surrender, like that's such a big, and when I encounter like quite often with clients, like just that word sends them into like like it can create this like just resistance, just the word surrender, because it's the definition given, like, what do you mean I can't just, you want me to stop, and oh, you want me to go live on a mountaintop somewhere, I have to live and I have to do. And so they come with their list of, but look at everything I have to do, look at my life. No, it's, you're still gonna live and do things, and but it's, boy, when you feel it, all you need is a taste of that bliss in the surrender, and to just shift your perception a little bit. And so I'm always just encouraging, like, I loved what you said, like, back, like, take 2 minutes. I often will say to people who are really frightened and resistant, I'll say, okay, look, take your phone, and every hour, set your alarm to go off. And for 1 minute, just think of nothing. If you work in an office, go to the restroom and stand there for 1 minute, just 1 minute. Start there and then see where you go, and you'll start to taste it. And then when you do, this opens up, and yeah, it's beautiful.
I was going to suggest, like, so people who want to work with Akasha,
Yeah.
one of the easiest way, like, obviously you had to work with energy, like, so life force, the first transformation, second transformation, and third transformation. You practice that
Yeah.
aspect. And then if you want to go deeper into it, the best way is you completely exhaust your physical will, maybe go for a sprint, right? And so when you do this, like, I remember a time when I'm completely, like, doing Thai boxing, like, they push you. right? I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
can't move anymore. And I just
Yeah.
collapsed and I just dropped into emptiness. And it was one of the deepest states I've been in because there's
Yeah.
no more
Yeah.
will left over. So it's easier to surrender. So when
Yes.
you exhaust your will, you will go into that vacuum space if you know how to, or
Mhm.
you fall asleep.
Yeah.
Right? But if you develop that relationship with Akasha, now it's easy to go into
Yeah.
that state. And
Yeah.
that's why I've been saying, like, oh, people who work out, who do physical training, like powerlifters and all these sort of things, they have, they can get huge volumes of these sort of things. But their
Yeah.
biggest hindrance is the ego and their
Yeah.
attachment to the body, right?
Yeah.
If they're able to let that go, then yeah.
Mhm.
But if they're not, then they're stuck in the physical form, in their own ego. So
Mhm.
this is where we have to look at like, oh, what's the best way to train? You train like an athlete, but like you surrender like a monk. You know what I mean? If you have those
Love
sort of
that. Yeah.
contrast, now
Yeah.
you got something special. Now you can make
Mhm.
things happen. But
Yeah.
obviously that's extreme commitment from one. Like one is full ego
Mhm.
attachment. I want to look this way. I want to perform this way. One is I don't care about anything. I completely let go. You bring them
Mhm.
together. Now you got
Yeah.
something special.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of power in that. You know, being able
Mm.
to be in the space of like surrender, and I'm heading that way, kind of like knowing you're having the frame but letting go.
Yeah.
You know, so
Essentially, what the etheric space or Akasha is the vacuum underneath everything.
yeah.
So the more
Mm.
will someone has, the more Akashic substance they have access to,
Uh-huh.
if that makes sense.
Mm. That does make sense.
Yeah. So say if you got a kilo worth of a certain material, like let's say gold,
Yeah.
there's a kilo
Mhm.
worth of Akashic vacuum underneath that,
Hmm.
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
The same thing. The more will that you have in form, the more Akashic substance behind that supporting that will,
Hmm. Like you
right?
were saying, that Akashic
Mhm.
space is kind of like a mirror in that sense.
Exactly, yeah. It is the substance. I mean, I say substance because you experience it like a substance, but essentially it's a
Mhm.
vacuum, and it's through that vacuum that everything in form exists,
Yeah.
right? Which is
Mhm.
that's what what they're referring to in the quantum field or the unified field or all these different terms that they're using. It's ether, akasha, wuji. They're all the same thing. Different cultures have different labels to them, and they've had
Mhm.
different ways of getting there. But essentially, it's your ability to let go of time and space. It's your relationship to time and space.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I want to just touch briefly on you talked about three transformations.
Mhm.
And so that's basically transformation from the physical to astral, astral to mental, mental to akashic. Is that the three
Yeah,
transformations?
akasha, and then your mind comes into resonance with the universal consciousness or non-dual light,
Yeah,
and from there you create a synchronicity pathway down to all the way to the physical. So the pathway up becomes a pathway down,
yeah.
because we want to not just that's the
Yeah.
ascension process of letting go, but to
Okay,
materialize the things, it's the three transformations down. So the three
okay.
transformations up and then three transformations down. And
So
essentially,
then,
what you're transforming is initially states of consciousness,
mhm,
right? And
Mm.
as you transform the state of consciousness, you're transforming the energy with it. And the more often you do that, the more synchronicity and alignment you're creating to your spiritual path to reflect in your physical path.
mhm. So then, can you maybe talk a little bit to the non-dual light? I think that will be the last thing that we have to probably close now. But
Yeah.
how would you define that? Because that could be a whole nother rabbit hole. So
Yeah, again, defining it again, like, takes away the essence of what it is.
yeah,
But
of course.
yeah, like it says, it's non-dual. Like what it is, no idea. It's a unified field of
Yeah.
consciousness. And I can only like describe what I experience in it. What it is, I can't tell you because I
Hmm.
don't know.
Hmm.
But there is a infinity quality of just like a light
Pure light.
and pure light, but as you keep releasing up, the light becomes less intense. Initially, the intensity of the
Mm.
light's like, whoa, this is very intense and it feels
Yeah.
great. There's a lot of power there, and we want
Yeah.
to attach onto that, but you want to
Mhm.
release that aspect because that's not non-dual. That's more of a
Mm.
dualistic light. It's still in the astral form. as you keep releasing it, it starts to get clearer and the light becomes thinner and thinner and thinner and becomes very fragile. So essentially what you're doing is non-dual light is a spectrum of reality where it hasn't manifested yet, right? It hasn't come into form yet. So the goal for spiritual ascension process is to stabilize our consciousness in that field of light where now you have a freedom of choice whether you want to incarnate or not, right? So you've let go of your relationship to gravity, so your mind can stabilize in that state. Once you've done that, then the ascension process it keeps going. You're removing anything stuck to the consciousness to understand what consciousness is. Because everything that we're experiencing it through consciousness, but we don't experience consciousness itself because we're experiencing whatever stuck to the consciousness. So the ascension process is letting go of that. And this is where the light becomes very clear and glassy-like. And what above that, I don't know. Well, that's what they refer to as nirvana or enlightenment or whatever. But what that is, I don't know because I'm not there yet.
Well, it seems like you're perhaps just a step ahead of most, or a few steps
No,
ahead of most.
not really. But this
Okay.
is the other thing. Remember, our consciousness, like our consciousness is outside of time and space. So someone could be like, say, in this lifetime, they're the lowest of the lowest, right? I actually recently watched a podcast with that lady from The Big Bang Theory. What's her? She's got
Yes, I can't think of her. Yeah.
but she interviews all these
Yeah.
strange people, and I saw this one where this lady, she was a drug addict, a prostitute, like you think of the lowest, but then she had a spiritual awakening, right? And
Yeah.
now she's completely, and you can feel it on the screen where she's let go of her past identity. Like there's no emotional content there anymore, and she's awakened to something. Because remember, we're in timeless space. That's what infinity is, Akasha. So multiple
Yeah.
lifetimes are happening at the same time, and in one of those lifetimes, you would have attained something.
Yes.
So this is not a linear process. It's not like I'm above anyone else or I'm below anyone else. We all have equal access to everything. It's all about
Yes.
synchronicity and resonance.
Yes.
Yeah,
This is where that's what I'm saying. Everyone should be their own master, own teacher, and my job is to get people to that space.
Yeah, I've heard one of the other guys also on another podcast talking about the fact that a lot of times, even like the gurus sometimes are not as enlightened as person that tends to their garden every day in a village or whatever, has kind of a low life kind of thing, but is very attuned to nature and is very attuned to the consciousness. And from that perspective, they are, in some sense, a little bit more of a guru than the guru itself, that is pretty spiritual. So yeah.
Well, one way to gauge this from a practical level is someone who is attained a certain level of awareness. There's a non-self that you experience from them. You feel it.
Yes.
That's why when I look at Sifu Mark, it's like there's a big non-self aspect, especially when he's teaching.
Yeah,
Like
selflessness
I
for
know him
sure.
as Mark Rasmus and I know him as a teacher. When he goes into that teacher mode, he's completely removed of himself, and he's like, whatever people need, I'm a channel for that, and that's what the people are going to get.
Yeah.
There's an indication of someone's spiritual maturity, right? The more non-self they are, the more spiritual mature they are.
Yep.
And this is something you want to look at when you're picking teachers. But if they're attached to like some sort of transaction in terms of not just financial transaction, but like, oh, you have to submit to me before I teach you, there's spiritual immaturity. They're still stuck in their ego. So that's an easy way to discern who's the right teacher to pick and not.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, we could keep going, but we're going to have to shut off for right now. But yeah, thank you so much for doing this. And I know I also want to invite people to visit your website, which I believe is lifeforcemastery.org. Is that correct? And then you have Instagram presence, Facebook presence as well, maybe, or mostly YouTube.
Yeah, mostly YouTube, but yeah, I'm not too sure what's happening with that because Pari like without Pari, I can't get as much content out. Like
Yeah.
Thanks
she,
goodness
she,
for the woman.
yeah, she takes care of all of that because I'm just not built that way. I'm more
Yeah.
of a practitioner and a teacher sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, YouTube I think
Mm.
is mainly where we're putting most of our content.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll definitely get the links to whoever is interested to check out your stuff. I highly, highly, highly recommend your course on Life Force Mastery. It's fantastic, really. It's I love the simplicity. To the point, the videos are short but so profound that it's like, oh my God, what did he just say? I have to like go back. It's like, oh my God, that makes so much sense, you know? And the practicality of that is just immense. And then, you know, there's one thing about obviously doing the things through video. You can get so far, and it's best to use the videos when you've already had the transmission, because having a physical transmission through a teacher is really the best way to learn. This is like when people say sometimes online where oh, this is a fake video. Well, it's not. You just don't understand what you're feeling because you haven't had that be felt before, or you haven't touched it before. You know, so like, and that you are so really good at that, either both things, explaining it and showing it. And this day I remember the first time when we're doing the wave the blanket and throwing for like 30 minutes straight, I think. And I'm like, how is this guy not tired of me trying to throw him anyway? So yeah, you guys, if you come across any Dinesh's stuff, workshops, online programs, definitely check him out. He is amazing. And thank you so much again for your time and
Thank
being
you.
available,
Thank
and
you.
yeah,
Yes.
all your wisdom that just comes right through you. So really appreciate it.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
it
much.
was
Thank you so
it was
much.
lovely to meet you. What a gift. What a
Thank
gift.
you.
Thank you
No,
so
thank you.
much for doing this with us. Really,
No problem.
honestly, truly.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That was amazing. So, if you enjoyed the session as much as I did, definitely like, subscribe if you'd like to see any more of the episodes that we put out, and hit the bell button so you know when we do that. So let us know in the comments again if something has inspired you. We'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to share something that you have experienced yourself that relates to what we were talking about and what you have understood. In the meantime, take good care of you, stay awake, aware, and we shall see you on the next podcast. Peace and blessings, and much love.